Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I am Paul John Dykes. You know, this is episode 1080. I'm joined by Colin Watt and Kevin McCluskey, who is in the studio all the way from Budapest. Kevin.
Paul, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.
You've got a certain hue that makes Colin and I look a wee bit peely-wally. Fair play.
That was me picking up a rugby park sunburn yesterday as well. And look at you, Kev. You're looking like you've come all the way over here. Never mind being for hungry. You look like a Greek Adonis over there.
It does, eh? It's got that Harry Keel going on. Kev, sorry, you're not getting too much of this. You'll get big-heated. Right, episode 1080. Welcome to the show, Colin and Kevin. It's always a pleasure. On a Monday afternoon, we've got loads to talk about, but let's focus on yesterday. Let's talk about the performance. Colin, you were at the game, the only one of the three of us who were there. Talk us through the performance, and obviously we'll start specifying certain players and their performances, but just overall, tell us about your day.
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, fantastic weather for it. One of the warmest days of the year we've had so far. And it was quite interesting to hear the comments from McInnes pre-match, saying that they weren't going to water the pitch because they didn't see any point in it. They said it would just dry out anyway. I mean, that's generally what happens with pitches, but you've still got to keep maintenance of them. It was a deliberate tactic yesterday. You could see it from the word go. It's always the sort of heavy-handed tactics anytime you play a Derek McInnes team. They came in, they tried to have a go at Celtic from the word go, and as I said on Friday night's edition of the State of Scottish Football, I thought if Celtic got an early goal, then the floodgates could open. It took a wee bit after the first goal for the floodgates to open, but Celtic kind of clicked into gear, especially after the water break in the first half, and you could tell that if Celtic wanted to score more, they could have yesterday. It was another one of those sort of polished performances from the boys. Again, I don't think we managed to get out a second or third gear. I still think there's more levels to come from this team, and that was even bringing that sort of performance in. The pitch obviously didn't help at all because it was a shambles yesterday. You could see the ball bobbling all over the place. There was players sliding left, right and centre. So, I mean, it was clearly a tactic that was driven by Kilmarnock, and it didn't work for them. If it wasn't Kyle Lafferty going up with the elbows, it was the bobbly pitch. They only had one way of playing football yesterday, and when Celtic get that early goal, you could tell that the game plan was over. So it was a very comfortable performance from Celtic yesterday. Very delighted to walk away with the 5 goals and without any real injury scares. We'll talk about Maurice Jens later on, but I think that was more a precaution thing because you saw him celebrating with the fans at full time as well. But yeah, great performances all over the team. Good to see us getting into that sort of cycle. And I think at some point this season at Celtic Park, or maybe even away from home, we could be pushing for a double figures result.
Oh, I heard this last season, Colin. That's bold. So Colin reckons we didn't get into top gear, Kevin. We still put them to the sword, 5-0. What do you make of Colin's comments regarding the pitch, first of all, right? Because, you know, these teams can be turned over by a Celtic side, Colin reckons we're in second and third gear, 5-0. They need to get every margin they possibly can to try and make it competitive. Now, I don't agree with elbows and roughhouse tactics, but, you know, long grass at Tynecastle, dry Astro pitch at Kilmarnock. What's your take on it? Is it just basically they've got to try and shorten that gap any way they possibly can?
I think they have. Before I answer that, I'm just going to say I'm just chuckling away to myself at some of the comments that are coming in about my appearance today. I've not been tangled. Paul's just decided to shine a nice bright light on my face here, so it's his doing.
The Greek Adonis. He's got a wee bit of the Giorgio Samaras about you there, sir. I'll bring the comments up once I find them, but yeah, I'll do that well, sure. Having a wee chat about the margins, the fine margins that these teams try to tap into to compete with a team like Celtic.
Aye, I think they've got to go for the fine margins, and I think conversely we do it when we play against the bigger teams. You always try and find that wee bit of edge that you can get somewhere. You know, if we go and play a Barcelona, Real Madrid away from home in Europe, we're going to look to get whatever advantage we can. So we're going to do the same at Celtic Park as well, make it as difficult as possible. I totally disagree with having an AstroTurf pitch in the top flight of any league in Europe. I don't think it should be there. I can understand why clubs have it for the revenue side of things, away from the pitch, away from the game. And if you've got one, I might not think you should have it, but use it to your advantage. If you're not going to water the pitch, if you think that's going to hinder your opponent, you do it. You've been training on it to win the game or to stop your opponent. It's just football. You just take whatever advantage you can get, whether we like it or not, and then it's up to us to play against that. And the team that we've got on paper should be good enough to win every game we play. And Colin's right. I think there will be a time we might not get to double figures, but we will give someone an absolute doing at some point this season if we keep on playing to the standard that we have.
Yeah.
And then we keep on improving like we did throughout last season.
It's a good comment, and there's a few people agreeing with you in the comment section, which I'll bring up here. In relation to the plastic pitches and that whole debate, whether or not they should even exist in the top tier, I asked our guest from Celtic Down Under yesterday on the match day, Sean, what the situation is in Australia. He says it's very rare for a plastic pitch to be used, certainly not in the top tier. What's the situation over in Hungary, Kevin? What can you tell us about the artificial surfaces over there?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think anyone in the top flight has an artificial surface. I'm not sure if it's banned or not, but they're all grass in the top level. In the second tier, there's a few that have the artificial surface, but the standard's not always that great anyway. So they just kind of get on with it, play the game. But top flight football in Hungary is all in grass, and I think that's just the way it should be. Because we saw a few times during the game, and there's one in the first half. The ball just takes an awkward bounce in the box away from Matt O'Reilly when he's maybe got a chance to knock one in. You don't get that on grass. You get a truer bounce.
Yeah. Yeah. What were you saying, Colin?
I was going to say, I mean, there's no excuse at the top level in Scottish football. When you take a look at some of the parks in the lower leagues, then they are all managing to maintain a grass park for 12 months of the year. I mean, Greenock is traditionally one of the wettest parts of Scotland, and year after year, Mark, who's the groundsman at Capello, has received numerous awards for how he's managed to keep that park. They barely ever have a game that's called off for it being waterlogged or whatever. So I don't think there's any excuse for a team in the top flight to have a plastic pitch. Yes, you can generate extra revenue from it, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're kind of set on grass. Football's been played on grass for generations. It doesn't need to evolve into a plastic pitch, especially when you look at it. I know someone was saying that the data suggests that Celtic's performances on plastic pitches sort of tie in with their grass performances, but with the probably lesser amount of games played on plastic, if you were to play more regularly on plastic, you'd probably see that skew quite a bit, because there is only so many teams that play on that. I just don't see there being any need for a team like Kilmarnock, especially if they're deciding that they're not going to give away fans extra tickets and they think that this is a way to generate revenue, to then decide that we're going to save money and play in a plastic pitch.
Colin, I think it's a good point, because there is a contradiction there. I would like to see the figures as to this money-saving idea around artificial pitches. What does it save you? And as Colin just says there, on the other hand, you're throwing 200 grand away by not allowing more Celtic fans into the stadium. So, good point, Colin. Well made, young man. We're 35 games unbeaten in the league. September the 19th was when Livingston beat us on a plastic pitch, incidentally. So we're going on for a whole year under Ange Postecoglou without defeat in the league games. And we've started this season off, I was talking to Kevin in the car on the way through, we've started this season off almost in full throttle. And it kind of flies in the face of this theory, Colin, I'll stick with you just now, that by making the permanent moves for Jota and CCV, we weren't actually improving the side. What a nonsense that's been as well, isn't it?
We spoke about this last week. There's no rhyme or reason to that. That was just a kind of throw it out, and if you say it enough times it will stick sort of thing. I mean, we've seen it numerous times in the Scottish media where people just throw out absolute nonsense, and as long as you say it often enough it becomes fact. And I'm sure everybody knows the big thing in 2012 that we're talking about. But when you take a look at it, players at the age of Jota and Cameron Carter-Vickers, they are there to develop. If you take a look at an 18 or a 19-year-old coming through, and we spoke about Leal Abada, who I thought actually had a very good game when he came on as well. We keep saying, well, when Leal Abada has another 2 seasons under his belt, how good is he going to be? Now, that's not a new signing every season, but it is a development of a player. And it's the same with Carter Vickers and with Jota. You're not buying the player that came on loan 12 months ago. You're buying that player that's had the 12 months experience playing for Celtic, playing at a high level, playing in European football. They are going to get better every single week under that coaching of Ange Postecoglou and playing at that high level. This is why when we're talking about guys like Stephen Welsh, who again was he's still kind of coming back from that injury, sitting on the peripheral of the first team. If he was to go out on loan this season, I think it would be better for his development playing week in, week out than just being part of that Celtic squad. And it's not a sort of dig at the player. It's you just want him to improve, and the only way you can improve is by playing week in, week out. Look at the steps that's been made by Liam Scales up at Aberdeen and by Adam Montgomery playing at St Johnstone. They're getting the time to play week in, week out. You can't guarantee that at Celtic. Get them out on loan. It just helps their development.
There's a couple of things on that, because we've spoken about loans a hell of a lot, Colin. You used to keep an eye on all the loan deals that were out playing all over Europe at times. And there's a couple of things. I've always been a big supporter of having the loan players, if possible, playing in our league. And I've said it a million times. And it's, it acclimatises them to the level that you expect them to play at once they come back. But also, they might weaken the opposition. And I don't mean, obviously, the team they're at. They might weaken the opposition, as in they might score a winning goal against Rangers or, save a penalty or whatever it may be. So I do agree with that. But I just think sometimes with the loan deals, it can be a bit sporadic. They can be all over Europe, and you wonder about philosophy and style and principles of Ange Postecoglou. And it's really important what the destination is if you put a player out on loan, if you intend on them coming back. So we've had some success stories in Chris Ayer, Ryan Christie, Callum McGregor famously as well. Tommy Rogic as well took a wee loan spell away from the club, came back. And I just think we've seen enough successes to know that it does work, but I just think the destination is vital. And I sometimes wonder why we don't maintain some kind of relationship with people who have been at the club who have gone on to manage. There's so many of them out there, and, they know the philosophy. I mean, Scott Brown knows the philosophy of Celtic and the way that we play and the winning mentality. And you think to yourself, 2 or 3 players down there could work. Ronnie Dyler's in Belgium, you'd feel confident if he took a couple. I know it's not as simple as that, but I just think the destination's so important, Kevin, with the loanees. Because, I mean, if we were to loan out Stephen Welsh and sell Julien, which looks to be on the cards, you're then wondering if you're a wee bit short in the central defensive kind of areas. What would you do with Stephen Welsh?
I think I'm with Colin on this one. I think he needs to go out on loan. I think Welsh is a player that's got a lot of potential, but he needs games, and he'll never reach his potential if he doesn't play games. We've seen in the games that he has played that he's fairly solid, prone to a wee mistake every now and again, as everyone is. He's only young, but I think if he goes out, gets a full season somewhere as a mainstay in the team, that can only benefit him. What I'd like to see Celtic do, and this is what a lot of the bigger teams do as well, is they've got a loans manager.
Yeah.
So you have someone that goes out and actually identifies your 5 or 6 players going to go out on loan for the season and picks the clubs. And like you said, Paul, they're probably picked with that. This team plays with a similar style to us. They've got a similar philosophy. They've got an ex-Celtic player as manager, so we know the expectations. I think that's something I'd like to see us implement. And then that way, again, when the player comes back, you're thinking he's going to be more ready to come in and play for us, rather than just he's gone out, he's got a year's football under his belt, but he's not improved.
Yeah. I think Gary Caldwell did that job at Man City before he went to Hibs with Maloney, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
And when you look at it, I mean, going up to Aberdeen for Liam Scales, it's a sort of similar style of football that Jim Goodwin's trying to introduce up there. Adam Montgomery playing at St Johnstone. I think Callum Davidson's always been someone who's tried to play a bit of football. But I'd also like to see maybe 1 or 2 of the players going to a team like a Livingston. See the teams that we've traditionally struggled to break down. Because if you're there for 12 months, you understand a bit more of what goes into their tactics, and you understand how at training you're able to break through them. And that knowledge can be passed back when you come back. It's almost a bit like a kind of cheap scouting mission, but there's players that are definitely going to get a game.
Remember when Kevin Graham asked Brian McClare about spies in the camp? Remember? Yeah. It's a wee bit like what you're saying there, but McClare tore him to shreds to a live audience. It was hilarious, Kevin McCluskey. If you've not seen it, have a look on YouTube because it's on there. Brian McClare handing Kevin Graham his backside in front of a live audience. Hilarious. Magnet67, afternoon Acsom team, simply sensational from start to finish on a terrible surface, and Kilmarnock and O'Reilly had quiet games. Loved Big Ange at the end. He just gets us. He certainly does. There's no doubt about that, and we're really in a kind of position at the moment where we're playing a game a week, and you just can't wait for the next game to come round. We're looking fresh. That's going to change during the season when you're getting 2 games every single week. Jerry Coyle put good money on gents, double figures. Who was the last Celtic defender to hit double figures? Anybody? I know that Julien was quite prolific, but I think he got 9. Didn't he get 9 one season? I'm not sure he got double figures. There you go. Have a wee think about that.
I wonder if Van Dijk ever got anywhere near that.
I'm not so sure.
He could hit the odd free kick. Maybe Charlie Mulgrew?
Chaz, possibly. Let us know in the comments, who was the last Celtic defender to score double figures in a season? Was it Charlie Mulgrew? Was it Van Dijk? McManus was good for a goal. Don't ever think he scored double figures though.
No, I remember the 2 goals that he got at Tynecastle to totally turn the game around in the last couple of minutes, getting into injury time.
And then there was that one against Milan. Magnet67, I said it last season and I'll stick by it. I reckon we will get a double figures win this season against someone. I mean, we spoke at half time, Kevin, about how sometimes you're phenomenal in the first half. And we actually likened it to a game up at Pittodrie, where we raced into a 4-goal lead, you remember, and McInnes ran up the tunnel, and you thought to yourself, this is going to be 7 or 8. But it didn't quite happen in the second half. That happens a lot. You blow a team away in the first half, they change their style in the second half. That didn't happen this time round. How big were the substitutions in making sure that didn't happen, do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I think so on that one, if you go in and you're maybe 3-4 up at half time, there's always the fear or the prospect that you're just going to take the foot off the gas for a wee bit, because the game's won, you don't have to go chasing it. Opposition's going to tighten up because they don't want a hiding. So, but I think under Ange it's totally different for us now. He does have the thing of we never stop, and he notices it as the game goes on. Maybe tempo starts to drop, things aren't happening, and he just turns to the bench, and we've got so much talent on there that can come on and just make things happen now when we need it to, even when we don't really need it to. 3-0 up, game's done, but he's still pushing to get the win, and that's or to get more goals, and that's a fantastic thing to have, because that's just drilling into the players from every game. Just never stop, just keep on going, keep on trying to get more goals, entertain the fans, and his subs always seem to make a difference. They just seem to add a little bit extra, and if you're an opposition defender, you see like Furuhashi coming off, but then it's Giacomakis that's coming on, or it's Abada that's coming on. I mean, that's just bound to put the fear into you. You're just going to put the hands up and give up, I think.
Yeah, and there's so much hunger on that bench. They're coming on, they're trying to win their jerseys. Exactly. Colin, how pivotal were the changes, particularly the treble change? I know that Gents was forced off. We'll talk about him later on in the show. But that treble change, I think it really upped the tempo, didn't it, at that time? 65 minutes in?
Yeah, definitely. And the one player I want to kind of highlight here is Aaron Moy. And as someone who's kind of split opinions when he came in, and to be honest, I've took a lot of convincing to kind of go over the signing, but yesterday for me, he was the perfect player to bring on. I mean, I think he had a pass completion percentage of 100%. He made 24 out of 24 of his passes. Nothing was difficult. Everything was a simple ball, but he was always moving. He was always there to pick the ball up. He was always there to keep, and it kept the attack going. It meant that we didn't have to go back to the centre halves. It meant we didn't have to go back to Joe Hart. We were able to just sort of keep Aaron Moy just outside that sort of semicircle in the player's half, and it just kind of flowed the ball, whether it went right or left, and it kept the attack going. And I was really impressed by him yesterday. I thought Abada, when he came on, he was desperate to get at the Kilmarnock left back. He put a couple of decent balls over. We could have had another couple, and then Big Georges, he's brilliant. He's an absolute game changer at times for us. and he absolutely loves an overhead kick. How he managed to nutmeg a goalkeeper whilst doing an overhead kick, he'll tell you he meant it, but absolutely no chance. It was fantastic. As Kev's saying, that's the difference now. When you looked at, even if you go back to Christmas time last year, obviously we'd suffered from a couple of injuries, but you looked at the bench then and we were bringing on guys like, and no offence to these guys, they've still got a lot of development to do, but Johnny Kenny, and we brought on Owen Moffat, and we're bringing on guys like that. Now you're actually looking to players and it's like, well, this guy's a Greek international, you're bringing him on. This guy's an Israeli international. This guy's the Australia captain. You're bringing these guys on that are not just adding experience, they're adding quality. And we've done that very well, I think, in this transfer window so far, is bring in genuine quality into the squad so that you're looking at it and you're saying, well, the first choice player is very good, but now your second choice player to get in there is also very good. And I think it brings on the players as well. Guys like Greg Taylor has been outstanding for the last 6 months in a Celtic jersey, and I think it's because he knows that there's someone. He knew we were going to sign a left back in the summer, and when that left back's came in, it's pushed him to be even better. And I mean, his pass for the first goal yesterday was just outstanding. So the fact that we're not just bringing in quality, we're developing quality as well is fantastic. And just to go back to your point on the last defender to make double figures, Virgil got 10 in his last season before he left.
Did he? Well done. Did you do that research yourself there, Colin, or did somebody comment?
Quickly looked it up. Wikipedia is your friend. Now, Brown Warrior comes in, you're commenting on YouTube. We are only just getting out of first gear. Just think where we will be in a few weeks when everybody, Moy, Hatate, etc., are all flying. Absolutely. And again, we spoke about Carter Vickers and we spoke about Jota and how season 2 you're going to see a different version of these players. I think Hatate comes into that category, maybe even Juranovic. If he gets an injury-free season at Celtic Park, that is, then we should see the best of him. Paddy Lavery, always a pleasure to see you coming in on the comments. There should be no doubts in anyone's mind now that Jota is the best player in the SPFL. I'm looking at you, Chris Boy. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Paddy. Someone suggested that someone else was the best player in the league. That's outrageous.
Surely not.
And I'm going to bring this up because Colin mentioned this earlier. Never understand clubs like Killie not wanting a full house, cutting their nose off despite the face financially. Absolutely. We're not going to labour it because we do talk about it quite a bit on A Celtic State of Mind. But Colin did make a very good point, Kevin, about the fact that, right, let's save a few quid. And I don't know how much the saving is, when it comes to artificial surface versus the groundskeeper costs of a grass pitch. And then how much are you actually renting that pitch out to make money back? Seriously, is it going to be financially viable? And then they get an opportunity to make not just money from tickets, but also from the pie stands and refreshments and all that kind of stuff. And they say no. There was a good point made, and I think it was from Lawrence yesterday, in relation to the point that Alan Burrows made to JP Mason on Twitter, how they're trying to forge relationships with their existing fan base. And if they've got to give up their seat, then it's almost as if the club don't care about them when Celtic roll into town kind of thing. So that was the point Alan Burrows had made. But Lawrence was saying yesterday it comes down to planning. So if you've got X amount of season tickets, yeah, you would like to be there or there or there in the stadium, but it's about engagement and ensuring that everybody's going to get in the stadium, everybody's happy, yet if Celtic come to Rugby Park, you can give them 2, if not 3 stands in the stadium. What's your take on it, Kevin? I mean, I get that I'm looking through green-tinted spectacles here. However, surely financially the clubs have got to get a wee bit wiser on that.
You would think so. I've no idea how much money they would make off having an artificial surface. They'd need to be renting it out every evening, I would think, pretty solidly throughout the week, the year, to be making anything from it. So I don't know just how that can be really viable for them. No, I've not been on a sunbed, Alan, but thank you. And as for getting fans in the stadium, as a spectacle, if nothing else, you want to get as many fans in as possible. You create an atmosphere. If I'm in charge of a club and I know I'm going to have 1,000 season ticket holders maximum, I've got a couple of blocks in a stand that I can put them all in. Now, if Alan Burrows wants to create a community atmosphere with Motherwell, which is fine, and I'm all for him doing it, why not stick those 1,000 fans together and then they have that community atmosphere. You're sitting next to the same 1,000 people every week. You're coming along, you're building relationships and whatever there.
Yep.
You're in with your tribe, your crowd every second week. And you have them in one stand. You don't split them out all over the stadium. You leave definitely one stand behind a goal free for your Celtic Rangers fans when they come, if not both. Sell them out. Like, a few years ago, I did a bit of research for the Supporters Direct Scotland, and the amount of money that the clubs lose is frightening on a weekly basis, or on a game by game basis, by not filling the stands out for these matches. So you think you've got 2 home games against Celtic, 2 against Rangers, that you could fill your stadium out, but you'll cut off your nose to spite your face and have it 50-60% full. It's financially, it doesn't make any sense. I know you want your fans in there to make it a home game, but realistically, you're probably going to lose the game anyway.
It's true.
Do you know, even on that,
it doesn't make any difference.
Even on that, Kev, right? So yesterday's attendance was read out, I think, is about 9,500, and of that, Celtic get 4,000 something in the Chadwick stand where we were based yesterday, right? So that means that realistically, that there was more Kilmarnock fans than there was Celtic fans at that game.
Yep.
Did you hear a single Kilmarnock chant?
No, absolutely not.
No.
So what was the point in saying, well, we need more Kilmarnock fans in? Well, you maybe do need more Kilmarnock fans in, but you need them to make a bit of noise for your team as well. It's all right having maybe 30, 40,000 if you can get that. But if they're all sitting on their hands, they're going to get outsung by 600-700 depending on how many away fans get in. I know away fans traditionally make more noise, but I mean, it goes against your argument of having a community team in there if you're not going to make any sort of support for your team. Yesterday there was 8,500 empty seats. 8,500 empty seats in the stadium. That's more than the capacity of some of the teams in our league.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense at all.
The thing is, Colin, as Kevin says, if it's thought out properly, it's, you're not going to have little pockets of fans all over, the stadium. And if they were, within an area, 5,000 Kilmarnock fans, then surely there would be more of a community feel, more of a vibe, more of an atmosphere, maybe a wee bit more singing as well. But it's something that will rage on. I'll never will fully understand it. I remember going to East End Park. It was a cup game. It was a game that Rasmussen played in. He might even have scored. I think Rasmussen scored with his knee or something. It must have hit off him and went in. And we were wearing the remake Bumblebee jersey. And I remember being in what is the North Stand at East End, across from the main stand, right? And they had sold tickets for seats that were being used for Sky cameras. So whoever had that ticket couldn't sit down. They ran out of everything in the kiosks within about 20 minutes. And, it just brought home to me how even when a club is given the opportunity to make that wee bit of extra dough, they don't know how to do it. And it's quite amateur. For me, it's amateur. People might accuse me of being, Celtic-minded, which I am. But, in terms of a business strategy, how on earth can you turn away £1 million over 4 games in a season, Colin?
I was looking at it in terms of, we were doing the State of Scottish Football podcast, and we're looking at the revenues.
That's twice he's mentioned that.
It's on tonight, 6 o'clock. You can all tune in and watch it. But when we're looking at it, you're looking at the revenue that's going to be generated for Hearts this season when they either make the Europa League group stage or the Conference League group stage, because they're guaranteed one of the two. Mm-hmm. And between the two of them, they're either going to make somewhere between £5 and £8 million. Now, if you look at their annual revenue turnover, then the season that they were in the Championship, they only turned over £7 million. When they moved up to the Premier League, it was £10 million. So that's almost a 50% increase just by the fact that you finished higher up the table. Now, when you actually break it down, Hearts got £1 million almost off UEFA because Celtic and Rangers had made the Europa League group stage. That's a payment that's made out to these clubs to represent the fact that, yes, these clubs are getting extra money for playing in Europe, and here's something that you can go and work towards to your transfer budget and your youth development strategy. You take a look at the fact that it jumped £5 million from the fact that they went from the Championship to the Premiership. Why is that? They're going to be playing Rangers at home twice, they're going to be playing Celtic at home twice. You can charge your fans more for that, and you can actually get additional revenue, and you've got what is a terrible TV deal, but it's better when you're in the Premiership than when you're in the Championship. So for these teams to turn away what could potentially be an extra 10 to 15% of their turnover, which then they could go and sign a player, that could make a massive difference to their team. I mean, imagine someone like a Livingston or a St Mirren spending 150 grand. Who can they bring in? Well, last season, St Mirren were very clever and brought in guys like Jamie McGrath and Connor Ronan, and it made a massive difference to them, because you can see with them not being there this season that they're struggling. But now these players are actually... Connor Ronan's one of the most wanted players in Scottish football. Jamie McGrath had a really good start to his career at Dundee United. Dylan Levitt at Dundee United, again, someone that cost very low figures. He'll go on and make a big profit for them. It's all about reinvesting that money properly and actually turning it over, because you can see that there is now a demand for players in Scottish football. Aberdeen sold players like Calvin Ramsey for £4 million. They sold Lewis Ferguson to Italy. The market's now there where people are looking at Scottish football and they're not paying sort of 150 grand here, 200 grand here. They're now paying the millions of pounds. There is a revenue for these teams to sort of not fully close the gap, but use it as to their advantage to build up where they can't replace the ticket money that Celtic and Rangers can bring in, but they can through the transfer fees.
What I love there is how Colin just said they sold him to Italy. Like he can turn out for... Mind you could probably turn out for Italy with that tan. But
I thought he was playing for Italy.
The thing is, who is it? Buffon? Pirlo. That's your cat.
Pirlo's the cat, yes.
But you're right about the players obviously being in demand, Colin. How many of the empty seats do you think Celtic could have filled yesterday? Give me a number.
All of them.
Everyone?
Every single one of them.
It's incredible. It really is.
You think about it, Celtic fill up, 8,500 seats at Arminville, or the Spaghetti Head, whatever you want to call it. And there's still people on the day looking for tickets.
Mm-hmm.
I can guarantee you that if it went out there, every single one of those seats would have been filled yesterday.
And the thing is, anybody watching this who doesn't support Celtic will be thinking, that's entitled. That's the fans are entitled, etc. Listen, it's about your own club and progressing and developing and making as much money as a business as you possibly can. And surely you can be a successful business and also garner this community spirit that Alan Burrows was talking about when he was talking to JP on Twitter. I always go back to Barry Hearn's comments. Remember, he lambasted Scottish football, those running Scottish football, calling them lazy and saying that those at the top had nothing but self-pity and all the rest of it. I tend to agree with that. I also remember listening to an Anfield Rap podcast years ago, and they spoke about how Liverpool employed somebody to come in and fill the seats, and the guy was getting interviewed, can't remember his name. He was talking about how there should never be an empty seat at a football stadium if the club are doing their job right. So Colin, I'd totally agree with that, right? Even if it means making sure that schools and all the rest of it are given allocations and all that to get kids into the game and into the team. I speak to people, Big Mikey that you know as well, Colin, who he's a massive... He is actually a massive Pars fan, because when you say that, people say, "Oh, how tall is he?" He is massive. He's about 6'5". But he supported Dunfermline all his life, and he talks about the experience of someone from Dunfermline. It might have been Ian Westwater visiting his school, and that was him hooked, And it's just these things, tapping into the communities, and also people who are underprivileged and the unemployed and all that. Get them in the stadiums, because I'd rather that than empty seats. I want to run through.
Well, Paul, sorry, when you look at that, I think, to be fair to Kilmarnock, they have done certain initiatives to try and get the fans into the stadium. They've got the standing sections in there. Lo and behold, everybody that was standing that was in a standing section yesterday was pretty much seated for the whole game. But they are doing things to try and generate revenue. But if the fan base aren't buying into it, then you've got to look at Ross County. Ross County says we're going to cut the Celtic allocation because we're going to get the fans back in up here, and then for the game 4 weeks later they've went, nah, it didn't work, we're sorry, here's an extra 2,000 tickets for Celtic. Now, Celtic could have turned around and told them where to shove it, but at the end of the day they know that the demand from the fans is going to be there anyway, so they can't really do that. If Kilmarnock were to turn around again and say, well, for the second game of the season you're going to get half of the stand on the right hand side, because the old away stand that you used to get now, they've put offices in there's offices in the second half of the stand, so you'll not fill the 4,000 again. but we'll get you in the stand on the right-hand side where the dugout is, because that was half empty yesterday. We'll move everybody over for the one game. Celtic will take it up, but I mean, it is pettiness from the other teams in the league to do
See,
that.
the thing, you get an insight, Colin, and I don't want to mention it again, but I'm going to have to. Your State of Scottish Football show. You get an insight from other fans and what they think about Celtic, right? You do get an insight, Colin, right? And by the way, they don't think much of Celtic. And I think there needs to be a real shift in attitude from the clubs. They need to embrace rather than hold the clubs in contempt. They've just got to embrace it. Scottish football's got two massive clubs, which is really an anomaly, because Scottish football shouldn't have the strength that it actually has in those two clubs, but it does. And instead of embracing it, they seem to just treat the two clubs with contempt. I mean, obviously, I'm talking from a Celtic perspective, and I just think that if they can cash in, they certainly should. Let's talk about some of the goals then. We'll start off with Kyogo. I think that goal's all about Greg Taylor. So let's focus on Taylor first and foremost. Big nods from Kevin McCluskey talking about Taylor. And we've got Slick Rick. Love it. Can we all join the Greg Taylor fan club group chat Amy always talks about? Well, you'll need to ask Amy, because I don't know if you need passwords and all that, and you need to know the answers to secret questions and everything. But yeah, big supporters of Greg Taylor on Acsom. He's been a revelation, not just this season, as Colin says, for the last 6 months, Kevin.
He has been. You know my feelings on Greg Taylor, Paul, quite well. He's my boy in that defence.
He's my boy.
He's my boy. I think he's a fantastic player for us. Always liked him as a natural left back. I think he's, as I've said before, he was never going to be the Kieran Tierney bombing up and down the line, but he's a solid left back. I always thought he did a decent job. But this inverted fullback role, where he actually gets to show off his range of passing that no one knew he had, is just, fitting him down to the ground. And that pass yesterday was unreal. Is he basically in the halfway line, and he's split the defence, through pass for Maeda, one touch across, Kyogo, easy goal. And he's done that week in, week out for the last season now, really. He's such an improved player from the one that he was when Ange came in, and I've just got nothing but praise for him. And as I've said on other podcasts, I'll happily sit down and just talk about him for an hour and the work that he does for the team. He's such an unsung hero.
Yes, and somebody's calling you Pablo Escobar in the comments now as well, Kevin. So you're getting all
I'm getting it.
You're getting all the doppelgangers. Greg Taylor, we spoke. Colin came up with a novel idea of sending people out to the teams with the plastic pitches so that they can acclimatise and work almost as spies to come back and fill in Ange Postecoglou. However, Colin, Greg Taylor playing on that plastic pitch, you knew that he knew every blade of grass on it. I mean, that pass was incredible for the opening goal.
Absolutely. I mean, being behind it as well as we were in the stand, it was just to see that gap isn't massive to get that ball through to Maeda. It had to be pinpoint, and it absolutely was. Greg Taylor, we spoke about him towards the end of last season. I think the second half of last year, he really came onto a game. And we're saying just before the semi-final that we lost, I says it won't be long before Greg Taylor gets a goal for Celtic, because the positions that he's getting himself into, and he's finding himself so much higher up the park, that eventually he's going to just put one in the back of the net. And obviously he did that in the semi-final. But now he's one of those players where a lot of people are saying, well, he's a defender, he's got to defend as well. But he is. But he's defending so far further up the park. You go back to the goal, I think it was the second goal against Ross County last week. He wins the ball back about 25 yards from the Ross County goal, and it sets up the attack. Now, we've always heard the sort of saying, the best form of defence is attack, but with Greg Taylor at the minute, that's exactly where it is. It's winning that ball further up the park. It means that it takes the pressure off your back two that's sitting there. Three if the sort of right back comes in as well. But winning that ball, turning it over, it puts the pressure back on to Kilmarnock. It puts the pressure back on to the opposition, so they're not getting that chance to reset. And I think that's where you see some of the goals from yesterday actually coming from the fact that a couple of these Kilmarnock players were sort of all over the place. We weren't sure who to mark, and it's because we can turn that ball over a lot quicker than what we did last season. And Greg Taylor being in that left back position, and again, he could have scored yesterday as well. He had a great opportunity to score. I'm a really big fan of Greg Taylor. I think he's someone who knows that he's not going to be the best player in the world, but he gives 100% for that jersey every week. and he's never really let the club down, and that's the kind of players that you want, and I think that's the kind of players that Ange Postecoglou would definitely have at the top of his sort of team sheet.
I don't know what it is with Scotland and left backs at the moment, but we seem to have quite a few at our disposal. I'm going to bring in a comment from Ridiculizer. Great goals, but it's exactly what we should be doing week in, week out with teams we dwarf in budget. I'll be impressed when we do it in Europe.
Is that Ewan Murray commenting? Because that's exactly what Ewan Murray's been saying the whole week on Twitter.
Is it?
Is that these big teams really shouldn't celebrate these victories because their budgets dwarf the other teams. So we've maybe unmasked Ridiculizer as Ewan Murray.
Well, you know, a lot of people do tune in under pseudonyms, but I don't know. Ridiculizer. To be honest, I don't really read the comments that you were referring to on Twitter there, Colin. However, what I would say on that is it's not as simple as that. Otherwise, Celtic would never get beat. You know, it's just a nonsense to say that, you know, you should win. You should because of the budgets. That's not what happens. It's a 11 v 11 man sport at the end of the day. It comes down to so many other factors. If that was the case, Manchester United would be doing better, right? You know, because if it comes to budgets, you know, it's true
They were shocking. That's another podcast itself on how not to play the sort of Celtic style of football.
Yeah, and obviously we've got the meme now of Hickey shoulder barging Ronaldo, which was an interesting bit of content as well. I'm looking at Abada now, 2 games on the trot. I'm thinking surely he's going to get this jersey. What do we do with him, Kevin? I think he's been very well managed by Ange. Last season comes in, teenager, spoken about the effect of Near Beaton, it's his brother for life and everything else. He doesn't have that there, but he's also got a support network because he has got to know his teammates. Yet he isn't a first pick at this moment in time. Will it come? Do you think he is, in effect, a better option on the right?
I think it'll come for him. I think Ange's playing the long game. We're 3 games into the season, and he's got a preferred team at the moment that's working for him. And then he's got someone like Abada that he can call off the bench, who just adds that wee bit extra quality that might have been waning as the game went on. His time will come. He'll get plenty starts as the season goes on, and I mean, what a player to have as that other option to either replace Jota or replace Maeda on either of the flanks when you need him. But I absolutely no worries about him that his games will come, and he's another one that's going to have another big season for us, I think.
Looks like it.
Said last season he came in and he overachieved big time, you would think, because he just hit the ground running. He had Near Beaton there, as he said, to kind of guide him through. Now he doesn't need him. He's his own man in more ways than one, I think. And he's if he just keeps on coming on, putting in those wee cameos that he's doing, then sooner or later he's going to make it really difficult for Ange not to start him.
Yeah. And
then you've got the prospect of you bringing Maeda off the bench for the last 20 minutes and then having his pace running at defenders. So it's a brilliant place to be, and the complete turnaround for 12 months ago.
Yeah. So there's a stat sheet here that kind of shows Maeda against Kilmarnock yesterday. According to this, he had 100% accurate crossing, 88% pass accuracy, 18 pressures, as in like closing people down, the highest in the team, 5 counter pressures chasing back to win the ball, the highest in the team, 7 touches in the box, 3 key passes, 2 assists yesterday, 1 interception and 1 clearance. When players are playing like that and you still don't think, oh, he's having the best game, that just shows you the kind of level that you're getting to. I mean, I thought Maeda was very, very good yesterday, but you still think back to the way he was last year and you think there's even more to come out of him. So guys like Abada, yeah, it's difficult. They're going to have to sort of bide their time and wait for maybe an injury or for someone to drop in form for them to get on the park. But when you're playing that sort of style of football, and as I said, I think every game we've sort of stepped it up bit by bit by bit, and there's more to come. You would struggle to try and change that team right now. You've always got that thing, never change a winning formula, and that's the way it is with Celtic just now. I mean, I heard that Celtic played Queen's Park in a friendly during the week, a behind closed doors friendly, and you look at the team that played in that, they had Siegrist in goal, Welsh and Julian playing, Bernabe and Ralston in the midfield, Aaron Moy started alongside James McCarthy, guys like that, and up front was Giakoumakis, and Abada played in that game as well, and you're thinking going, if that's a bounce team game, I would fancy us to beat almost every single team in that league with that team. So that's the kind of squad depth that we've got now, and it's frightening.
Yeah, it's almost a reserve team. Back in the day, of course, they used to play that game pre-season. It was the A team against the B team. Bizarrely enough, they called the hoops the stripes, believe it or not, and the away team used to wear the shamrock top, very similar to the one behind me here. But, you know, you had two very, very strong teams pitting themselves up against it. And that side that you just named there just now there, Colin, is a very, very strong side. And like you say, it probably would beat most teams in the league. Ridiculizer comes back in. You're more Paul Hartley than Georgios Samaras. Did your man Ewan Murray say that during the week on Twitter, Colin? I'm not sure. No. Donny Boy 67 with the best avatar on YouTube. Regarding the plastic pitches, no club wants to give the opposition the edge on their home ground, so teams will use any advantage they can. We have our own ground suited to our team and won't change it. Interesting point that, because obviously we do have the vast expanses of Celtic Park, which I think benefits our style of play. What a goal. Jota, 34 minutes in, 2-0. We've not even spoken about Jota. Over to you, Kevin McCluskey.
What a player. Where do we start with him? And some people think he's not the best player in Scotland. It's unreal. He's a phenomenal talent. I again said it one game last season that being abroad, I don't get to see him live and in the flesh like you guys do every week. In the game that I saw him over at Ferencváros, it's the little flicks and touches that he does. Everything's done with a purpose. He's so talented. The way that he runs with the ball at his feet, there's no defender that can cope with that. And now he seemed to be adding the shot to his game that he didn't seem to have last season. Everything was a bit more measured, I think you would call it, last season. But now he's 25 yards out, sees a gap, just goes for it and puts one in the top corner. He is a phenomenal talent, and maybe I'll get a few other comments in the section here for this one, but we should make the most of him while we've got him, because he's that level of talent that he'll go and play for richer clubs than Celtic. Maybe not better, but he'll go and play for a richer club than Celtic, because he's a guy that'll just catch the eye of scouts all over Europe, I think, if he keeps on going as he is.
Yeah, 100%, and it does lead us on to that. Yeah, we don't want to think of a time, Colin, where we don't have Jota to brighten up our afternoons. But when a player stars for Celtic, inevitably there is interest. We've already had interest apparently this season for Juranovic from a number of sources. Atletico Madrid and Chelsea have been mentioned, and there has also been apparent interest for Matt O'Reilly, and that was Leicester City. I think I've been interested in O'Reilly. So it's going to happen, and we had a whole podcast dedicated to the fact that for the first time in 5 years we weren't going to sell one of our assets. Remember that? And then Romano
the next day,
disagreed. What does he know? Anyway, and what Kevin's saying is true. You have a season like that, especially if you do it on the biggest stage in Europe, and you're going to get interest. But Colin, am I a dreamer? Because I keep going on about this plan where we have the team together for 3 years under Ange, 3 or 4 years, to really see it develop. Is that realistic?
I think if you can make a dent in Europe, then you can keep these players for maybe 2-3 seasons. I think if we go down the sort of route of maybe not getting out of the group stage or maybe not having European football after Christmas, then it becomes more difficult to say to these players, look, we'd like you to stay another season, because we know that sort of carrot of European football is one of the things that we use to attract people to the club. So Jota, 23 years old, he could stay here for 2-3 seasons. He'd be 25, 26, and at that point he's coming into the prime. And we're saying that he's fantastic now, but he's just about to come into the prime of his career. So you just wonder what kind of clubs would be interested in him, what sort of transfer fee you'd be talking about then. And it's the same with some of the other players that's coming through. Juranovic is slightly different because he was that bit older, and I think that was the argument, was the fact that it's potentially he is in his prime just now, so that is the time that Celtic could make their money off him. But on Jota, he seems to be the player that we saw in glimpses last season, but he's now almost been given this additional freedom this year. You're seeing him getting in the spaces, you're seeing him sort of quite casually taking players on, knowing that he's better than them. And that's fantastic to see, because it gets fans off their seat. Already in 3 league games this season, he's got 2 goals and 3 assists. It should be 3 goals, because he should have buried that one in the first half as well. Yesterday, the one that the goalkeeper made the save from. But I mean, that sort of statistics over the first 3 games, if he carries that on through the whole season, you're talking about someone who's potentially going to bang in upwards of 30 to 40 goals, going to have 30, 40 assists. It's going to be very difficult, if that is the case, to keep a hold of him. But as you say, you've got to enjoy him while you can, and just kind of continue to invest in the club and continue to invest in the playing squad, and it will make it that slight bit easier to keep a hold of these big players.
Yeah, you're right. I think Champions League is a massive carrot, without a doubt, and we've not done well enough in it in the last 5 years. Tim Billy, all pitches should be grass, the greener the better. There's no arguments here with that one. And Paul Cook, classy touch from Jota yesterday, praising Greg Taylor in his post-game interview. Real show of togetherness in our camp. He has been a touch of class since he came to the club. There is no doubt about that. But talking about class, what about our centre-half, Maurice Jens, with the overhead kick? Kevin McCluskey. Colin and I have already spoken about our previous defender by the name of Maurice, and I think that I'm kind of warming to Jens a wee bit more than I did to Bauer, even though I did like Bauer.
Don't think that's a difficult one, Paul. I think in his first appearance against Norwich, Jens had probably done more to impress than Bauer did in his...
Am I the only Celtic fan that didn't mind Maurice Bauer?
I think
no, Alan Morrison told us he was the best right back that season, so it's you and Alan against the world, I think, at the minute.
I don't think he had much competition that season, though, Colin.
Remember, he turned up at a player's dance dressed as Inspector Gadget as well, remember? With the hat and all that. Scott Brown was running about with his jacket on.
Yep.
I think he's now with UFA, which was a team that Bolingoli was loaned out to, one of them. Anyway, back to the main man. Jens, he comes in, he scores the overhead kick. He's for me, I just think he's been tremendous. He's a centre half who's grabbing goals. That's what we were kind of crying out for. We thought we'd lost a bit of that with Julien fading out of the team as well. Kevin, how impressed have you been by the big man?
I've been really impressed by him so far. I'll even go back to that Norwich game when he came on for the last 10 minutes or whatever. He just looked really composed in the ball, and you're thinking, all right, it's only a friendly game, let's see how he does in a competitive game. But he's just carried that on in the couple of games that he's played. For years we've lacked that real threat from corners and free kicks, the big boy that just goes and wins the ball, challenges for it and scores the goals from the back. And he's come in, he's done that already. 2 goals in his last 2 games. He's a threat at both ends of the park. Well, not a threat at both ends of the park, but you know what I mean. He's good in there at both ends of the park. He'll clear the ball away defensively, and then he's got in with his 2 goals already. Very comfortable in the ball. Looks to have a good relationship with Carter Vickers already. So I'm really positive about what he can do.
You're still getting stick in the comments.
I know, every single one's coming through. I'm trying not to
It's
look
a very
at them
healthy glow you've got going on there, Kevin. Come on.
And it's all your fault for shining that light in my face. I'm actually really peely wally.
Nothing like it. Even Jota's reaction to Starfelt's goal, Pete McGee points it out. Absolutely. There's a real togetherness, Colin, at the moment with this team, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see it even towards the end of the game. All the players coming down to the fans and appreciating their support throughout the game as well, and everyone getting involved in sort of celebrations. I mean, Jens has sort of stepped into that position. I think, and what really impressed me about Jens yesterday was there was a time in the first half where coming down that sort of the left-hand side of Celtic's defence, the right attacking side of Kilmarnock, there was a couple of players that slipped up, and he was one of them. He found himself out of position, and it was all to do with the pitch. It wasn't to do with the players themselves. You could tell it was the pitch. And then the next thing, he gave the ball away, and then he tried to clear and it didn't go too far. And you're thinking, a player like that, it either goes to their head and they're kind of struggling throughout the game, or they can use their experience and get over it. And Jens yesterday used his experience to go over it. He scored a fantastic goal, and he was very comfortable for the rest of the game. So it's one of those things where you've seen Celtic players before. If they have a poor start to a game, or if they have a kind of off start to a game, like Julian did against London Dykes at Livingston, it totally gets into their head and they can't get it out for the rest of the game, and it affects their performance. Jens was able to go over that as well, especially with the way that he was treated in the first couple of minutes with Lafferty, the way he was throwing his elbows about. I think he kind of ended up with a stud to the leg as well. He's showed every bit of the experience that he's got to guide himself through that, and having that partnership, I think, with himself and Cameron Carter-Vickers at the moment, it's going to be very difficult for Starfelt to get his jersey back, as much as it was a great scene to see Starfelt finally break his duck for Celtic yesterday.
Finally, absolutely. 50 games in and he scores a goal. When is the draw for the Champions League? I think it's the 25th of August, isn't it, Colin?
Next Friday, yeah.
Champions League
draw. Next Friday on it too.
The Godfather, and I'm sure we will be able to look at that and analyse it. We want to talk a little bit about a bit of gossip that doesn't seem to be going away on Ross Barkley. I'm going to ask Colin about that. But Starfelt scores, and with his left foot as well, Kevin McCluskey, the centre-halves have started scoring goals. And it's so important at that stage, and I made a wee note here, it's great to score as many as possible any day of the week. However, the goal difference obviously is superior at that point. We're on 8 and our nearest challengers are on 7. And then we score another with a Giakoumakis overhead kick as well. But again, it gives us that real dilemma, which is a good thing for Ange, where you've got two guys running for inclusion in your starting lineup, Kyogo and Giakoumakis. But I just think that someone mentioned before that Colin said that it's difficult to make any changes in the team. But I just think it depends on the game, depends on the opposition. I mean, there's certain teams I would probably start Giakoumakis over Kyogo, and it's nothing to do with a lack of form on Kyogo's part. But when he's come on, he certainly reminded us yesterday that what he can do as well, Kevin, Giakoumakis.
Yeah, it's actually something I was going to say earlier on when Colin was talking about the teams and who comes in and out. We saw it last season when we played Livingston at Almond Vale. That was the game Juranovic dropped out and Ralston came in. And there was a couple of other changes, I can't quite remember who they were, but everyone's thinking, Juranovic is the best right back in the country, why are you taking him out? Why is Ralston come in? Because the game fitted Anthony Ralston. And Ange will do that throughout the season. He'll just make changes. He'll think, we need a more physical centre forward up there. Giakoumakis will come in. We need a little bit less pressing, maybe, or we need someone that can get in behind the defence a bit more. That's Abada, not Maeda. And he'll change his side up from game to game as he sees fit, but keep the nucleus of the team the same. The same as he does it with just those little tactical tweaks of how he plays the game, depending on the opposition. So I think it's great that we've got these options now. And yeah, big Giakoumakis coming off the bench, another one-touch goal, nutmegging a goalkeeper with an overhead kick. There's your question: who was the last player to do that?
Well, I remember Dembele doing a back heel through the legs of the goalkeeper, but an overhead kick through the goalie's legs.
Was that Dembele as well? Maybe against Man City.
Did I go through the keeper's legs?
I went through the keeper's legs.
Don't know. I need to check that, Colin. Decent shout though. Decent shout. Are Acsom doing a live show for the Champions League draw? What time's it on it? Do you know, Colin?
5 o'clock.
5. We may not be doing that, Michael. We may not. We might go in, what do you call it? Spaces. Might do that. So one final bit of chat is all around Ross Barkley, because it's a rumour, but it seems to be rearing its head time and time again. And I'm going to come to Colin Watt first of all. Colin, what's your thoughts on the rumour that Celtic are pursuing Ross Barkley? Also, another one I'll throw in, Giakoumakis comes on, scores a goal. Do we still need another striker, or does that all depend on a Yeti's departure, whether or not we can get him out the door?
I think it will really depend on a Yeti if we can get him out. Again, I don't think he's someone who's going to have a place in the squad. Even if one of the sort of strikers was injured, they would be there to make up the numbers. I don't think he'd ever be at the point where you're saying, we're going to bring him on, we're going to start him, he's going to be able to change the game, because he's not really done that. So I think Celtic will try their best to move him on, and if they do, then they'll look at maybe bringing in a signing similar to Jens, where it's a player who's maybe not got the first team position at the minute, and could be brought in as a loan with an option to buy. And I think there's plenty of great talent down in the English Premier League and the sort of B teams and the under 23 teams that they know they're not going to be first choice, and that's got to be kind of made clear to them, because they are a kind of youth development and they can be brought up. And you never know, you might pick up the next Edwards, you might pick up the next Dembele by doing that as well. But at the minute, Ayeti's one that's probably picking up wages that are far too high for him to be not even involved in the squad, and we need to move him on first. In terms of Ross Barkley, again, it would come down to the finances, I think, that's involved in that. We spoke about guys like James McCarthy, who's got an injury history, Aaron Moy, who hadn't played a lot of football. Barkley himself, he is a talented player, he's got plenty of experience. I think he just kind of faded out of that Chelsea team round about the time that Jose Mourinho moved on for the second time. It wasn't sort of someone who suited the way that Chelsea's been playing over the last couple of seasons. His performances when he was at Everton, he was a kind of clear standout there, and you could tell that he was destined for bigger things, but it's just never happened for him. I think the move to Chelsea probably put him back in his career, and he looks like someone who needs that next step to move on. You take a look at guys like Jesse Lingard, who moved to Nottingham Forest. He needed that kind of move away from the bigger teams to get himself in his career back on track. If Ross Barkley thinks that he can do that at Celtic, then I'd be all for him to give it a try, as long as the sort of finances suited our budget. I did say to you before we came on air, I actually met Ross Barkley in Ibiza about, 6-7 years ago at Ocean Beach Club, so I'm sure he suits a lot of the Celtic players partying, and he'll have a great time up here in Scotland if that's the way it is. But no, it's a position we could probably still do with strengthening in that sort of 8 to 10 position. As much as we've brought in Moy, we're still seeing injuries to Hatate, Ideguchi. Turnbull's not had the greatest of starts to the season, but he can certainly improve, and I don't really know if we've ever replaced Tom Rogic quite yet, so having that challenge for guys like O'Reilly and O'Reilly and Turnbull, and having that experience that we spoke about previously, it wouldn't be a bad signing as long as it all sort of tied into our budget.
We shall see how that transpires. It's been a quick hour on this Monday afternoon. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved in the chat. Thanks all for your comments. We know that it's all tongue-in-cheek when you're slagging off our guest, Kevin McCluskey. At least it's you. It's normally me that gets the slagging.
Normally you, so I'll take it this time.
Oh, good man. And thank you once again, Kevin McCluskey and Colin Watt, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.